It's now 4 months old with no sign of ending, so we thought we might get you caught up. Now, Russia bombed a shopping mall in central Ukraine yesterday. The government says 1,000 people were inside, more than a dozen died, and dozens more injured. Now, the question is, will we see more massive attacks like this on civilians?
And here to get us up to date on what's going on and what we may expect is Ambassador Kurt Volker. He's been an ambassador to NATO and a U.S. representative to Ukraine negotiations. He is now an advisory businesses ambassador. Thank you so much for being with us and lending your unique perspective.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Craig. Great to be here.
Of course. So to start us off here, can you give us a sense of where things stand right now in Ukraine?
So Russia launched this invasion 4 months ago with an effort to take over the entire country, overthrow the government, install a pro-Moscow government in Kyiv. That effort absolutely failed. They stalled out on the way. They didn't have enough supplies, rations, logistical support, and they got pushed back from the major cities, including the capital, Kyiv. What they then decided to do was just take as much of eastern Ukraine as they could, closer to Russia, close to the Russian border, consolidate control there. And Putin came out and said that he's going to annex it to Russia. He sees himself as a leader like Peter the Great from 300 years ago, saying he's accumulating Russian lands. So this is about taking this territory from Ukraine. That effort by the Russians has been more successful. They have been able to accumulate more territory and to secure that. And the Ukrainians are fighting back. But it is a very, very hard slog fight. Lots of artillery, 60,000 shells a day from the Russians against the Ukrainians. And as they move that inch by inch forward in eastern Ukraine, occasionally the Russians do what you just showed us, that they'll launch a long-range missile or two or three or four and take out some targets that are far away in the major cities in Kyiv and Odessa and western Ukraine, just to show that they can, just to terrorize the population. And eventually the Russians are going to push for a ceasefire on the lines that they control, something Ukrainians are very, very unlikely to accept.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, we showed a map there and showing the Donbass region. How much control do pro-Russian forces have over that long disputed region?
Right. Well, in that area of Donbass, what you have colored in red there, they control probably about 2/3 of that, the kind of a crescent shape in the eastern part of that. But in addition to that part, they control a land corridor in the south all the way to the Crimean Peninsula, and they control Crimea, which they took in 2014, as well as a part north of there. So the total amount of territory that Russia has now stolen from Ukraine is about double the size of what you showed.
And as a result of all of this, we've seen a really concerning refugee crisis. From your vantage point, how bad is it?
Well, it's an interesting refugee crisis. It's not like the one that we saw in Europe with the Syrian refugees fleeing Assad's regime there. These are about 5 to 6 million Ukrainians who have left the country. They've gone to neighboring countries like Poland or some further west. They're able to get settled there. They're able to work. They've been given permits to stay for a couple of years. And yet many of these people have begun to return to Ukraine. They miss their homes. They feel as though they have a role to protect Ukraine, a role in the fighting, to restart the economy, check on their houses, check on their family members. So that number has probably gone about down to 4 million, perhaps, maybe a bit lower than that, of Ukrainians that remain abroad. Whereas in Western Ukraine, in the capital city, Kyiv, it's relatively safe on a day-to-day basis, and people have come back.
All right. Now, you were a representative in Ukraine, a U.S. representative, so you have a sense for Russia. You know Ukrainian President Zelensky. I mean, how important is he to Ukraine's morale and the fight that's going on?
Well, he has done an outstanding job as a symbol of the nation. He has stood up every day. He gives a speech to the Ukrainian people over social media every day. And he is very clear about the need to defend the country, the need to take back the territories that Russia has seized, the need for greater international support to help Ukraine get the means to do so, the need to help Ukraine rebuild and recover as soon as possible. He has really galvanized the country and galvanized an international community to support Ukraine. So he has played an absolutely critical role. I think it has passed a tipping point in a way where even if he was not there, the Ukrainian people now have the narrative and the message, and they are so determined they will fight to protect and rebuild their country no matter what.
And we know with a lot of countries trying to assess what they can do, it's a really precarious line to walk. But what can the United States do now?
Well, the U.S. has done an awful lot. So let's give credit where credit's due. We're looking at giving Ukraine about $40 billion of assistance this year, $24 billion of that in military assistance. And that includes missile defense systems, which are critical for things like that shopping mall that we just saw. You need to be able to shoot down those missiles if they're coming in. Longer range artillery systems so that they can hit the Russians where the Russians are. The Russians have longer range artillery right now, so they can hit the Ukrainians with impunity. This is going to even that out a little bit. Lots and lots of ammunition as the Ukrainians burn through ammunition. And finally, you know, we have to stick with this. Russia has a big army and lots of armaments and lots of people that they're going to throw into this war. And if Ukraine's going to survive, they're going to need help over several months.
All right, Ambassador Kurt Volker, we thank you so much for being with us this morning and getting us up to speed.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.